My wardrobe lady is on vacation this week, so I'm wearing the same outfit. Hey, folks, we're still keeping up the illusion that this is an actual ad. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Do 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 do. Monday something blue. Something dump bump 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 bump. It's Wednesday. I'm in. Hey, picks of the week. Picks of the week. Picks of the week. Picks of the week. That's a new picks of the week theme, to the tune of the theme song from Nosin' Around, which is the fake show inside of the show. First episode of The Young Ones, 1981, I think. Oh boy, it's been a week, folks, and it's not showing any signs of letting up. I did buy new funny books this week, although not like my whole week's worth. It was a heavy week too, because I am now currently paying off this beauty, this lovely little laptop that I now own. But fortunately, some expensive things that I ordered also came in. Well, expensive-ish. So, as you well know, I've been reading Cerebus again. So finally, the next 2 phone books came in, although they're definitely skinnier by the day, it seems like. Guys is the one I've been looking forward to the longest, and Rick's story is one that I own, but I've never actually read. So this is obviously the follow-up to Jaka's story. And, yeah. Cerebus. Found out something rather distressing this week when I got these as well, is that there are 4 trades left. 4 phone books left. Right? Yeah. Yeah, Going Home is 2, and then Latter Days is 2. And Form and Void is in there. So maybe it is 6. Yeah, I think Form and Void is 2 phone books. But Going Home is the next one, and that is still available, but that's it. So you get Volume 13. I really want to say there's only 3 more, but I really am losing count. You know what? I have a decent computer now. I can at least look. So I don't know. I haven't really dug around or looked into it, but I can assume, I think, that these last few phone books went out of print and they haven't put them back into print anytime soon. I think they probably... I'd be very surprised if they don't. They'll probably be more expensive than I would care for. Yeah, 4 more. Okay. Oh, right. Form and Void is the second part of Going Home. Okay. So the first part of Going Home I have on order. The second part, as well as both phone books that comprise Latter Days, not in print. But I don't want to wait until they go back into print, even if they are hardcover, which, frankly, I don't have anything against hardcovers. I prefer the softcover, if I'm being honest. But I want unity. These are all softcover. So, I don't know. I'm hoping they'll just put them back out in print in regular phone book form. I looked on Amazon, and they're selling for like 300% over cover, which is more than I want to pay. But I also don't want to, like I said, I don't want to wait. I want to read. I want to finish reading it. So there is the official Cerebus website. I don't need this. You can download them for a reasonable sum, and it's obviously not the same, but I will finish Cerebus probably before summer, so that's cool. I'm also going to be in Long Beach for the next 10 days, starting tomorrow. And so I'm probably not going to haul my whole week's worth of comics down there, although I will probably have some that I get on Monday. Well, I'll be doing the show in a rare remote location. Yeah, it's picks the week. Thanks last week. All right. I just walked in the door. I am exhausted. I haven't been home since I left yesterday morning. But enough about you. So last week I read, Black Widow 14, and this was great stuff. It was nice to have Elena Casagrande back, but it didn't have the usual, there's usually at least a 2-page sequence where or like a 2-page splash where there's a big action sequence, and that was foregone this month replaced with this deal, which is still very impressive and I think very cool looking. Not quite what but it was still, because at this point that 2-page spread has become the main reason I'm buying this book, or one of them. But it was still very fun stuff. Ghost Rider #1 was also very fun and very of its time. Like nowadays, when they want to kind of, as they say in the film industry now, have a requel of something where it's not a hard reboot, it's not a hard sequel. So you've got Johnny Blaze living in an idyllic suburban setting where things are not as they appear. What? And so by the end, he becomes Ghost Rider. Still rocking a very Danny Ketch look, I gotta say. I mean, it's not unlike the original 70s Ghost Rider, like that outfit there. But then, I don't want to give away the last splash, so I'll give you this panel here. That's Danny Ketch's motorcycle, as far as I can tell. Johnny Blaze rode a dirt bike, or just like a stunt bike from the 70s. Not a big. This is a big, hairy 90s with all the flames. Ooh. Again, I'm not complaining, because this is more for, I think, guys like me who came up in the 90s and were reading more of that stuff, even though it is a Johnny Blaze book. I guess I might as well bird walk down this if I haven't already. I don't think I have. The original Ghost Rider was Johnny Blaze, whose father-in-law was also a stunt driver, or his soon-to-be father-in-law, and Crash Carson. And he lived up to his name and crashed. And Johnny sold his soul to Mephisto in exchange for sparing Crash Carson. But then he also became, in that deal, the Spirit of Vengeance, who hunts down hell's evildoers. That was in the 70s, and by the 80s, interest had waned. He'd still pop up every now and again. But then in the 90s, they reintroduced Ghost Rider, this time with Danny Ketch. And I don't remember Danny's backstory. It's revealed later, not immediately, but it's revealed later that Danny is Johnny Blaze's half-brother. Something to that effect. Distant relation, or somewhat. But I don't remember now exactly why he gets joined up with the Spirit of Vengeance. I'm sure it's a very similar thing. Selling his soul to spare somebody else in his life. But it was way, like, you saw the bike was way more aggressive. Everything looked, this is the early 90s too, so it was very of that Tim Burton Batman aesthetic is how I've always thought of it. And then the character was huge all through especially in the early 90s with Wolverine and Punisher. Those three were Marvel's big bad boy characters. And I, as with the Punisher and Wolverine, couldn't get enough of it. So, and then they brought back, at that time also, Ghost Rider was such a hit that they did bring Johnny Blaze back, but he just went by Blaze. And he had a ponytail, was very ill-informed. And they teamed him up in a book called Spirits of Vengeance. It was called Blaze, it was called just Spirits of Vengeance. I want to say Blaze and Ghost Rider, where it was, I want to say it was Danny and Johnny teamed up, but it also, I want to say it was Johnny Blaze along with the Spirit of Vengeance, who is now known as Zarathos. Maybe then also. Later on in the aughts, they brought Ghost Rider back yet again, and this time I believe it was Johnny Blaze. Garth Ennis had done a couple minis here and there, but this was reintroducing Ghost Rider back into the Marvel Universe at large. And I'm pretty sure it was Johnny Blaze this time. Danny Ketch had gone bye-bye. Although he did come back. And that run was written by Jason Aaron and then later by Daniel Way. Great stuff. Probably the best Ghost Rider stuff yet, I would say. And now we have this. There was a couple. There's been like Jed McKay would do a ghostwriter book here and there, and I really like those. And then they got Benjamin Percy on it. So there's your little ghostwriter lesson. A couple years ago, during the quarantine, I was buying a lot of T-shirts, and I found one online, a ghostwriter T-shirt. But then when I got it, the design was entirely too large. I was picturing it like a smaller, and it's a picture of a drawing of Ghost Rider from the first issue. I want to say it's like the first splash page of him riding the bike, and it's his Ghost Rider. And in my mind's eye, it was like a much smaller design, and so this big tacky thing. So now I barely wear that shirt. Yeah, that's a fun story. Here are some other things that I read last week. Twisted Tales, number 4, number 5. Twisted Tales is a favorite of mine going back to my high school days. Published by Pacific Comics, San Diego's own Pacific Comics, which holds a reasonable place in comic book history. Pacific Comics was begun by a couple guys out of San Diego, which has always been, aside from my hometown, a big comic book town. There's San Diego Comic-Con, obviously, has been going on for over 50 years now. Jack Kirby lived there, I want to say, or did he live in LA more? But a lot of Jim Lee is from San Diego. A lot of comic book professionals have either hailed from San Diego or have lived there for some time. And I don't know why that is exactly. Pacific Comics in the late 70s, I think they started out as a shop, and then as a distro, and then as a small publisher. And they got Kirby and guys like Neil Adams, who were legends in the field, largely kind of nobody. I don't want to say nobody. Kirby was huge in the 60s, obviously. Adams was big in the late 60s into the 70s. By the late 70s, they were both, their legend status had been cemented, but they weren't the flavor of the month. The hit of the day. Like when Kirby went back to Marvel, well, Kirby went to DC in the first place. DC was kind of disappointed with, they thought there would be more, his books would be hotter, and it didn't turn out to be the case so much. And then even I think when he went back to Marvel, they kind of felt the same way. They were happy to have him back, but are like, he's not selling books like he used to. And I think Neil Adams was less, like, Neil Adams was still kind of a rock star at the time, but they both had in common the fact that they had been screwed over by the big two. And in one particular arena, which is in their original art. So this is all this comic book stuff, especially back then. It was all work for hire. You draw the pages they assign you. You get paid for them. And then, even though they can't, obviously the artists can't publish these books and make money off of them, it was, I don't know if it was just not heard of, or I don't think the publishers cared. The publishers were supposed to return the art. They weren't buying the art itself. They were buying the assignment. So it became but Kirby got screwed on that. Marvel kept tons and tons and tons and tons and tons. That's actually, I think that's what it was. It wasn't until around this time, in the late 70s, early 80s, that art started being returned. That's what it was. I'm a little fuzzy. Kirby, in particular, got screwed on that because his original art was worth thousands of dollars, and nobody who worked at Marvel back then who had sticky fingers did not know that. So that was like a revenue stream that they were being denied. Pacific Comics was one of the first publishers to come to artists like Kirby and Adams and say, hey, we want to publish your stuff and you own it. We just want a piece of the action. We're big fans. We want your stuff out there. We want it to be that. And then we'll make our money just off the fact that we've published these legendary creators. And I mean, to an extent, they're not around anymore, Pacific. They haven't been around for years. But they were also instrumental to my own comic book collecting because they were the first publisher to publish Gru the Wanderer. In fact, the very first appearance of Gru the Wanderer was in a Pacific comic called Destroyer Duck, which was at least partially, if not fully, drawn by Jack Kirby pro bono because it was being used to raise money in Steve Gerber's lawsuit against Marvel Comics for rights of Howard the Duck. So yeah, that was how Pacific started. Was, hey, we'll give Kirby his own publisher, basically. And the stuff that he did for them was not bad. It was Last of the Viking Heroes was one, I believe. Or no, was that something else that the Pacific did? What was the Kirby? Silver Star was a Kirby book on Pacific, which was another character I think he had created for either Marvel or DC and then kept for himself when he realized he was getting screwed. What else? I want to say there was another couple of books. Neil Adams had Skate Man, which I believe was a skateboarding crime fighter, if not a roller skating crime fighter. Either way. And then they also did stuff like this. Just, more experimental stuff. Experimental. But more off the beaten path stuff. So Twisted Tales was kind of a part of a trifecta, if you will. Yeah, Pacific Tales, or Twisted Tales, Alien Worlds, and Somerset something or other, which was the crime book, which I don't know that I've ever read. Alien Worlds is the sci-fi, Twisted Tales is the horror book, and they're all anthologies. I think the Somerset one was anyway. Twisted Tales and Alien Worlds. Anthologies in the mode and mood of the 1950s EC horror comics, Tales from the Crypt, etc., etc. These are all written by Bruce Jones, who at the time, Bruce Jones started at Marvel in the late 70s, I want to say, as a writer and illustrator. I think he's mostly now known for being a writer. That's certainly how I know him. He and his wife, April Campbell, started these anthologies, again, very clearly to do EC type horror stuff. And Bruce Jones is just a great writer. He nails it, and they get who did this cover? Well, I know Richard Corbin did the cover for this, and Corbin's always good for this sort of horror stuff. Now I gotta look at these. And they would get really good artists of the time, Richard Corbin, guys who had drawn for Warren magazines, Creepy and Eerie. So John Bolton did the lead story in here. Also, just really a lot of excuses, not unlike the EC comics, to have women dressed scantily. Don Lomax did a story. Don Lomax is mostly known for his Vietnam comics. He himself was a veteran, as far as I can recall. Bruce Jones did the own art in here. So most of his books were Vietnam Journal and stuff, but he's really good, and he has a very Rick Geary vibe going for his work. Yeah, exploitative horror at its finest. And so I have a handful of these. I would always grab them up because they were pretty easy to find in quarter bins and stuff when I was a kid. This one. Oh, early Bill Ray. Bill Ray I knew from Cracked magazine when I was a little kid. He also drew some stuff for the Ren and Stimpy show, the original run. And he would draw, they would have stills, it's an animated show, obviously, but occasionally it would throw to a still, and I was like, oh, that's Bill Ray, because he's got a very recognizable style. I also was a big fan of Cracked magazine growing up. Val Merrick, who is another Bronze Age era superstar, especially in horror. And then they could draw nudie pictures in here. Rand Holmes drew the last story here. And yeah, like I said, Bruce Jones wrote all of them. April Campbell, who I don't think they were married at the time, but they are now. I discovered Bruce Jones in the early 2000s. I had read some of these, but I didn't really know who I didn't put it together then. Because he quit. He's just not writing comics now either, but he kind of would fall out and come back in. I think he might do novels and stuff. I think he's probably just retired now because he's pushing 80, I want to say. He had been out of comics for a while, and maybe it was DeFalco. Somebody at Marvel that he knew from the old days said, hey, do you want to take a run at Incredible Hulk because nobody is buying it? It was kind of like they were about ready to axe it, I think. And so Bruce Jones came in and just blew everyone out of the water. He brought the book back to the sort of the Bill Bixby days. Well, the Bill Mantlo days, I would say. When that TV show was very popular, Bill Mantlo was the writer for the comic book, and the comic kind of echoed the show, the whole, hitchhiking thing, and just Bruce Banner drifting from town to town doing good. And also Hulk being like, leave Hulk alone. That was Bill Mantlo's more than the TV show, I guess. So Bruce Jones brought it back to that. We were back to Bruce Banner just kind of being on the run from the government and stuff and trying to stay off the radar, and then also having to help people out that he meets. And so I went nuts. It was I hadn't read the Hulk in a long time when they did very smartly, they did a promotion where they sold an issue of Incredible Hulk cover price 25 cents. And I was like, well, I can't. I think also the Absorbing Man was in that. And I was like, I would have just bought it for that. And then that was the only thing he really did for Marvel, I guess. But it was huge. And then he went back to DC. And he did some stuff that I liked. Like he brought back Vigilante. And I think he brought back Warlord. He did a Dead Man series, Vertigo, which I didn't care for, as I recall. But I think I might need to. I think I got rid of it, and now I'm like, oh no, I need that back. I need a complete run of Dead Man. That's one of the last things I remember him doing. And I looked him up the other day, too, when I was reading these. And I don't remember. But he hasn't really done anything in the last 12 years, comics-wise. And finally, this is one of my favorite acquisitions of recent time. This is Archie Gets a Job, published by, as you can see here, New Barber Christian Comics. Now, kids, it's already been 20 minutes. I went on the Ghost Rider thing and the Bruce Jones thing, but now we're going to get into some Christian comics. I, like most right-thinking people, worship the devil, but I find, because of this, I find Christian pop culture is some of the most hilarious stuff. It's really easy for some hipster, atheist, Satanist, dudist, smarty pants to laugh up his sleeve at Christian pop culture, but it's very funny. I've seen a couple Kevin Sorbo movies on the big screen at this point. I don't like giving them my money, but also it's so much fun. If you see a Christian movie playing in your neighborhood at an AMC, you have to look for them, but they're there. And get ripped to the gills and go and have a good time. It's as cheesy and lame as any other B movie. It just has a spiritual undercurrent. I've been thinking about this all week because it's exciting for me. Well, I guess I can do a little bit of history. Al Hartley drew this. Al Hartley drew a lot of these. Back in the early 70s, Archie Comics were going. So Archie Comics have never gone anywhere. And with this Riverdale show, they've only gotten more popular, probably. In the early 70s, they were like, why don't we do Al Hartley, I think, actually. Al Hartley was, I don't remember how it works now. I think it was that Al Hartley was drawing for Archie. He was a very devout man. And he got them to do some Christian comics, or maybe that was it. Okay. Spire was the first imprint that Archie had that was Christian comics. And you had the Archies, the Archie gang, getting into Christian mischief. And then you had a lot of stuff like they did a comic book adaptation of The Cross and the Switchblade, which is a book written by a priest or preacher based on his experiences proselytizing in the inner city. There's Hansi, the girl who loved Hitler. That's a Christian comic book that came out in the 1970s. They're hilarious. They're so much fun. And they're very similar. They're not, like, you have the most famous Christian comics, I would argue, are the Chick Tracts. Those little tiny comic books that you would find, or that I used to find at, like, payphones and stuff. They were little Christian comics that Jack Chick, insane man, would write and draw and publish himself, and he would get people to distribute them. And that's how you'd always find them in kind of weird places. And those are unabashedly just hilarious. Very shrill, very you're going to hell sort of thing. These are obviously a lot lighter. New Barber is just kind of the continuation of Spire. Spire was from like 72 to 82. And then I think maybe that's where Hartley came in and was like, hey, can I just have this? and they renamed it New Barber. Archie Gets, this is 69 cent. Nice. Cover price. This is from 1988. So it was originally a Spire comic. I don't particularly need to have every iteration or every printing of these books. I just like to have them. I only have a handful. I haven't gotten one of these in a long time. Spire comics and New Barber comics are something that I kind of keep to buy at conventions. When I go to, which has been a long pre-quarantine since I've been to a convention. But there's the big books that Piranha Press put out in the 90s. There's these. There's the Dark Horse hardcovers of the EC reprints. Those are all things that I could probably find online, but they're more fun to find out in the wild. And it's been a long time. I will say this too. This is what I was getting at. That I do find it funny that they are wedging Christianity into these funny books. Especially because, alright, so Archie Gets a Job is a story of a young man who is on the road with his father in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Oh, wait a minute, that's Cormac McCarthy's The Road. They're so similar. I get them mixed up. This is actually about, it's summer in Riverdale, and Archie needs to get a job because Mr. Lodge is not going to let him just hang around the pool and try and bone his daughter. So Archie has to go get a job. Mr. Weatherby has a bookmobile and a bookstore in a lighthouse on the beach. And oh no, now he's got to put up with this Andrews boy and Jughead all summer. But then they're selling good Christian books. So here, this is my absolute favorite part. You have Ethel, whatever. It's not Big Ethel, is it? Is this even Ethel? I'm pretty sure it is. She wants a book. Yeah, this is Big Ethel. Okay. Update by Fred Hartley. A little nepotism in the Hartley family. And Al Hartley even has a little note here. He's like, I might as well promote my son's book. Update, a new approach to Christian dating. Oh my goodness gracious. If I find that book somewhere, that's going to be a happy day. Because I can only imagine, look at these hot simmering singles here on the cover of Update. Walking, I'm sure she's carrying a Bible there. Not touching, you gotta leave room for the Holy Spirit in there. And then of course it works for Ethel. All Big Ethel is the hit of the beach because she's reading aloud from this book. Very Sermon on the Mount. And it's just so silly. I will say this, and this is what I've been saying for a while now, or I've been trying to say for a while now, is as I was reading this, I was very much enjoying having a big laugh at the world's most popular religion. But I will say that there is something very innocent and very pure about these comics, especially the Archie ones. The other ones get way preachier. These are definitely lighter. There's always a spiritual, or really just a Jesus message. There is something very, what's the word I'm looking for here? I thought of it the other day, and it was very, oh, you guys should have been there. It's just innocent. It's uplifting in a way. It's like, oh, it's nice. It's a nice thing. So yeah, I'm laughing at it, but I'm also aware that it means well, in this scheme of things. It's not telling you to hate other religions or to do, you know what I mean? It's not that kind of like Jack Chick sort of hellbound. It's just lighthearted, good Christian fun. And you know what? There's nothing really wrong with that. This is the sort of thing that I feel like if kids couldn't get comics because I've known people who grow up. I didn't grow up religious at all, which is why I think it's it's definitely one of the reasons I can laugh at it so easily. But I always think of kids stuck in the Bible Belt and not getting any comics at all, and then one of their aunts gives them this, and it's like, well, it's something. And that's how I feel about this show, I guess. That's probably how you feel about it. I don't know. All right. I'm going to go eat.